What's up, guys? This is Nick from Arch City Poker, and in today's Poker 101 video, going to be continuing that series with today's topic covering how to play mid-pocket pairs, specifically pocket 10s to pocket 7s. So have a new setup for this series. Going to try some PowerPoint slides, see how that goes. Let's get started. Without further ado, entering the pot first. With these combos, I think you should always enter with a raise. This is going to be for balance and board coverage. You want to be able to represent the nuts on many different types of board textures post-flop. And you don't want to split your ranges into raising and calling ranges pre-flop, because then any competent opponent will be able to range you pretty perfectly post-flop. These mid-pocket pairs, they have really good showdown value on a lot of different board textures. Dry, disconnected boards, you will be able to often get to showdown with these pairs very profitably. The same goes for paired boards, and then monotone boards, which the type of board textures which a lot of players don't consider their hand to have a lot of showdown value on. But when you have, for example, pocket 10s on ace 8-4 all diamonds and you have a 10 of diamonds, or pocket 8s on queen 5 deuce all spades and you have the 8 of spades, those two different examples, you have added equity and added showdown value because of your ability to possibly turn or river flushes. And if you don't, and the board runs out, pretty dry, then you do have some showdown value with your solid pairs. So definitely consider those things when entering the pot. Always enter for a raise, and then just understand what types of board textures your hand does well on. Now, why is it so important that we have showdown value? Well, if these specific combos, these mid-pocket pairs, we don't need to flop sets to profitably play these hands pre-flop. So these hands will definitely be a stronger part of our checking range from out of position. You can throw these hands into your check calling range. Just be mindful that you are balancing that range and you're adding some top pair plus combos, because if you always check call with a hand like pocket 8s on, king 7 deuce, then your opponent's going to know that you never have king x plus, and they can pretty much go bet, bet, bet and get you off of that hand a lot of times, or put you in like really tough spots. So just be mindful of that, but these combos do fit very well into a check calling range, and they'll have great showdown value. You'll often be able to profitably call down. Now, let's say the flop checks through, and I'm talking again specifically about being out of position. You can often go for one, maybe even two streets of thinner value with your mid-pocket pair. For example, pocket 9s on jack 4 deuce. There'll be a lot of turns and even possibly rivers that you can go bet on and get your opponent to call with worse. Now, facing an open raise in position, you want to keep the following in mind. Essentially, do you have really tough players behind you? Are they going to be 3-betting you a lot? Are they going to be putting you in really tough positions, out of position, post-flop? These players don't often exist in bunches in live low-stakes games. If most of you guys that are watching these videos, if that's your game of choice, these players often don't exist, but you do want to keep in mind if there is, for example, a really good player or an aggressive, tough player behind you, there's a misconception that you can profitably just flat all pocket pairs. Pocket 7 specifically is part of this video series, I should say this topic today, the mid-pocket pairs. That one is about the cutoff. It's going to be borderline. I would say be careful of over-flatting and cold calling that combo specifically too much. I think pocket 10s through pocket 8s, you can pretty much cold call profitably no matter what. Those combos will fit in to a very strong and tight flatting range when you're in position. Now, one question you do want to ask yourself is, does my combo do better as a 3-bet? If you are on the button, for example, and the cutoff opens, if you know that he's has a pretty standard and wider cutoff opening range, especially if he's a loose player, I would definitely consider 3-betting pocket 10s or pocket 9s, not inviting the big blind or small blind into the pot, because this will be a much more profitable situation for you. You bloat the pot in position, you get the pot heads up. It'll be much easier for you to navigate the pot that way and realize your equity. So I do think that's something that you guys should consider, but just keep all of that in mind. Now, when you're facing a raise out of position from in the blind specifically, things that you want to consider: what position is the pre-flop raiser raising from? It's often best to just flat these mid-pocket pairs versus any kind of standard early to middle position opening raise, or against those ranges, I should say. They're often tighter and pretty narrow. I don't think 3-betting mid pocket pairs accomplishes a whole lot against those ranges, so you pretty much can just flat them and go from there. If you're facing a late position raise, so let's say like hijack, cutoff, button, especially against the cutoff and the button, I prefer to 3-bet these mid pocket pairs from the small blind as part of a pretty much just 3-bet only or raise only strategy from the small blind. I do this to discourage the big blind from entering the pot or any other limpers. I try to take down the dead money pre-flop right then and there, and if I don't, then the worst case scenario is I often end up heads up post flop with a very strong range. And you can often navigate the pot pretty well. You have specifically these combos that allow you to realize your equity and your showdown value again pretty well. So I do think you should consider 3-betting more from the small blind against a late position raiser. Now from the big blind, I think you can mix your strategy a little bit. 10s and 9s, I would, for simplicity, as you guys can see on the slide, I think I would 3-bet those a little bit more often as they're stronger. And then 8s and 7s, I probably would flat a little more often, but I think I would mix 3-betting and flatting all these combos from the big blind. I think you can flat more often just because you're often closing the action. There's no reason to try to bloat the pot out of position at that point then. It's probably okay to just go ahead and flat and see a flop either heads up or maybe even 3 ways, but you're going to be closing the action, like I said, and you're avoiding bloating the pot from out of position. So the last thing to keep in mind when you're facing an open raise from out of position, specifically being in the small blind or big blind, is that cold calls in between you and the pre-flop raiser will give you better immediate odds to possibly flat with any of these combos. It definitely makes it a little bit harder to pull off a 3-bet though, as squeezes tend to not work as successfully from out of position because the players that are obviously in position feel a little more comfortable about playing against you post-flop, just because they're going to have position. They're going to be able to control the pot size a lot of times. So I think that you should definitely consider possibly flatting a little more often when you have multiple cold callers. If you have 10s or 9s, and let's say the hijack opens, the cutoff, and the button call, you could consider a squeeze with 10s or 9s, not only for value, but to pick up the dead money right there. And like I said, to try to get the pot maybe heads up as a worst case scenario. Now, proceeding post-flop as the pre-flop caller, not a whole lot changes, but you just want to keep in mind, as always, does my opponent have a range advantage over me or not? Does my mid-pocket pair have very strong showdown value on most board runouts? So, for example, in example 1 here, a tight under-the-gun pre-flop raiser makes it 4x, and you flat pocket 8s from the big blind. Flop comes out ace-10-3 with 2 diamonds, and you don't have a diamond, and the pre-flop raiser c-bets pot. This is not a combo that I think has a ton of showdown value. It doesn't do very well on most board runouts. Ace in the 10 specifically hit your early position standard opening ranges very well. So you have poor equity against any reasonable c-betting range from a tight early position raiser. You also have poor equity on most board runouts, as broadways and diamonds are often and always very bad cards for you. Now, in example 2, let's say an unknown middle position raiser makes it 3x, and you decide to call on the button with pocket 9s. Specifically, you have a 9 of hearts in your hand, and the flop comes ace-8 deuce with 2 hearts, and the pre-flop raiser c-bets half pot. This is a scenario where you should probably be continuing more often than not. You have a lot of equity against a half pot c-bet range on this disconnected ace-high board texture. You also have good equity on most board runouts, as running hearts is going to be good for you, and you can continue very profitably with that type of runout. Backdoor draws, such as hearts, and in this example, are nice to have because you can often continue on many turns that many opponents will reasonably fire again on the turn. For example, pocket 8s on king 9-7, you have that backdoor open-ender. So if the turn's a 5, you can often continue, whether it be a call or a raise, depending on your opponent, how you think that he'll react to that, or what's the most profitable line. And then if you have 10 diamonds, 10 of hearts on queen 9, 3 of 2 diamonds, and the turn's a king of diamonds, all of a sudden you've picked up a ton of equity with your ability to river a gutter or even a diamond draw. So it's important to understand on a lot of board runouts how your specific combo does, especially if you have some backdoor equity. So I hope you guys got a lot out of this different type of vlog that I did today. Feedback is always encouraged, and just let me know if you like this style with the PowerPoint slides and being able to see me in the corner so you can still see me as you were in the previous types of vlogs that I was doing for these Poker 101 videos. Until next time, this is Nick from Arch City Poker. Take care.